Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. Welcome to the Eagle Insight Podcast, your go-to source for bold and actionable leadership insights. With more than 30 years as a military officer and a strategist, I know leadership is about real impact. In this series, I sit down with top industry leaders to uncover their challenges and their success secrets. Ready to elevate your leadership? Well, hit subscribe. And if you'd like to be a guest, visit 5eaglesleadership.com/interview. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Eagle Insight Podcast, where we talk about leadership in every industry. As leaders, we hear a lot about the importance of networking, and it's great for client acquisition or for finding partnerships or growing our business. It helps us gain industry insights or diverse perspectives, and we start to build relationships that matter. But sometimes there are really not a lot of resources out there that tell us exactly how to do that or how to do it right or how to be efficient with it, especially in today's busy world when getting on a busy leader schedule seems impossible. But fortunately, there is a way to get really good at networking really fast. And today's guest is an author and an executive career job search coach and a great human being. Please welcome to the podcast, Nathan Perez.
Good morning, Bob.
It's so great to see you. And your book, The 20-Minute Networking Meeting, and I know there's 4 different versions of that. We'll talk about that, but it was absolutely instrumental in my journey as I retired from the military. So can you tell us what inspired you and Marcia to write this book?
Well, this goes back to 2012. I was recruited by the firm that Marcia was a partner in, and it happened all through a networking thing. I had 20 years in the entertainment industry, and when I was working, that was like my real life at the time. And my co-author knew that I had this background. She had a concept idea about a shorter networking meeting, and we got paired up and we put those two things together and came up with the first book, which is the executive edition, the 20-minute networking meeting executive edition. And then shortly after that came the other books. They're modified and written for respective audiences. But it was an original concept. Marcia thought, there could be a shorter networking meeting. I was coming at it from the entertainment world. She was coming from the retained executive search side. Turns out that all networking is the same. It worked out, and that's how the books happened.
Okay, so a little bit of context about the entertainment industry. Briefly tell us what your history with that is.
Yeah, sure. So I was a professional actor and writer. I'm a formally trained actor with a BFA Theater Arts. I was in the business for 20 years. I got to do lots of recurring roles on television shows from back in the day. If anybody remembers soap operas, I did a lot of soap operas, some guest starring roles. But all along the way, one of the things that I had always heard from school all the way through is you got to network. You got to go out there and network. You got to meet people and build the relationships. But what's that, right? And so it came to a point where Marcia and I met. And in retrospect, I've been networking all the time. And it was all because of the entertainment industry. So, yeah, that's a little bit of the actor background.
That's awesome. And I knew some of that. And of course, I've known you for a few years now because you helped me in my transition out of the military. And our first one-on-one contact was a 20-minute networking meeting that I used your format to get on your schedule and to spend 20 minutes picking your brain and creating this connection. So right here is proof that works, that, a humble soldier can reach out to a famous author and actor and build a connection there. It was a simple formula to follow, and I found it to be so effective. So can you share kind of what are the principles behind it?
Yeah, sure. The idea is taking an hour-long networking meeting and shrinking it down into 20 minutes. I think a lot of people, when they think you got to go out there and network, you need to sit down for at least an hour, right? And have a whole bunch of talk. I think people sort of think that the longer time you spend, the more of engagement, the more of a strong relationship you're going to end up with, after that. When the truth is if you strip out everything that you talk about in a discussion, it really shrinks down to like 20 minutes worth of talking about the things that you want to discuss. So that's the big part of it. It's really straightforward stuff. There's only 5 steps to it. The first step is a great first impression of you. This is like a meeting. And by the way, it's not a hard and fast rule, this 20-minute thing. This can be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but here are the parts that you'd really want to have put together in your meeting, no matter how long it is. Great first impression of you, about a 30 to 60 snapshot of your background. The discussion part, that's comprised of 5 key questions. That's the bulk of your meeting, about 12 to 15 minutes long. And then let's see, there's 5 key questions. First 3 are formulated for your peeps. And then the fourth and fifth is about getting to know other people through that contact and then following up afterward. That's it. It's as simple as that.
And it seems very simple. I don't know why it's not more commonly followed, because it just makes a lot of sense. Like, let's make a good impression. Let's talk about some stuff. Let's get some background. Let's share. Let's ask, and then let's follow up. It's not that difficult. Why do people struggle with this so much?
I think people are caught up with how the meeting is supposed to go. And so how am I supposed to be acting and what am I supposed to be saying? And it's really simple stuff. You're there, you've done your research, you're there to ask a few questions, and that's really it. But people, rather than having an agenda, they tend to kind of improvise along the way, and then you're kind of all over the map. And what's happening with a model like this, like the 20-minute networking meeting, is you're actually taking all the elements that would take place inside of a meeting and you're lining them up in like a logical sequence. So for example, if you and I were to sit across from one another and you were to start asking me questions, the first thing through my mind might be, wait a minute, will you tell me your name again? I'm sorry, what is this about? And like, how long are we going to be here? But if you have something like this, then you already know that these are the things that need to be addressed in a meeting, right? So you come in with a good first impression of you introduce yourself, you ask, can I give you a little bit of a snapshot of my background to give you some context here? And so rather than being all over the map, you kind of have this orderly thing that you can, these steps that you can go by. And by the way, each one of these steps, they're written with a time limit. Each one of them has a time limit. So that helps you kind of keep on your agenda, right? An agenda is all about a planned discussion.
So I think there's so many people that don't plan discussions, and I find it in leadership when I am coaching leaders. They'll go into a corrective conversation with somebody where they're trying to help them be better at their job or correct some performance or behavioral issue, and they don't have a plan for how that conversation is going to go. And when I sit down and I give them a formula for how to talk about something that's corrective, they go, "Oh, I guess that makes sense." It's like, yeah, because you got to quit shooting from the hip. And a lot of leaders are really smart and they become very successful at just making it up as they go along. But at some point that runs out.
Yeah, it's a real tricky moment because you can come off as unprepared. Right. And especially if you are leadership, that is not the impression you want to be giving, is that you are unprepared. So you should be doing your research. Everybody is there to have a meeting, but if you don't know really what you want out of it, you're gonna be reaching for things. And then what happens is if you're not specific and you ask a question, people are shooting in the dark as to an answer because you were not specific in your ask or what it was that you were looking for. And that just shows unpreparedness. And that's really tough too. So if you think a little further down that meeting, when it's time to ask the question, is there anybody else that you can think of that I could talk to and ask these same questions? What's going to go through that person's mind is, I know like 2 or 3 people, but this person doesn't seem to be prepared for these kinds of meetings. Because they're kind of all over the map. They don't quite know what they want yet. This is why they're asking me the questions. And what often happens, Bob, is the person you're sitting across from suddenly feels like they've got to start asking you questions in order to clarify or get an understanding of why you're there in the first place. And that's a real problem because now the tables have turned. You are no longer running your own meeting.
That's exactly right. You've lost the initiative, as we would say in the military. And when you cede the initiative to the enemy or your rival out there, that becomes a significant problem because now you're playing defense when you wanted to be on the offense.
That's right. And that's a whole different game plan.
It is. And you may not be prepared for that game plan.
Yeah, if you are, great.
The having a plan thing is so critical before you even get in the room, before you even make the phone call or send the email to get on somebody's calendar, is to have a plan. And I think the first step of that is, what do I want out of this? Like, what's the purpose? What's the why in this connection that I'm trying to make?
Right. And how do you get there, right? How do you get to the why? You have to ask yourself what you're looking for. So let's just think about job search. And it's not that you're looking for a new job. Maybe you're looking for an entirely new industry, but you don't know exactly what that's going to look like. But those are the answers you're trying to get. So what do? You go out and network and you get the answers. You say, Bob, I saw that you went through this transition coming out of the military and then you got into the business thing. I mean, what did that look like? And you can give a professional side and a personal side, right? But those things that are running through your mind, those are the questions you ask, because when you get the answer, now you're going to get a little more of your picture. And you can go and ask multiple people the same kind of questions to kind of fill out that picture, or perhaps it's giving you enough of a foundation to start asking more informed questions about where you're going as far as an industry change is concerned. But the truth of the matter is if there's two parts to this. You've got to know, but in order to know, you've got to do some research, right? Anybody that you would ever meet up with, you're going to do research on them and their organization or their background. There'd be no reason to reach out to someone and ask for help, believing that they could help you when you know nothing about their background, right? So you have to do that. Once you understand someone's background, you might be able to start coming up with questions that are relevant to you and your own transition or your own goals.
Yeah, I always love the question in a job interview when they ask you, do you have any questions? Because this is such a great opportunity to show that you've done research, that you understand. So now you can ask insightful questions instead of it like, what is it you do here, right? Those kinds of questions. What I always is tell people before either a networking meeting or even an interview, never ask a question you could have found on their website.
Absolutely. If it's available, that should have been something that you found.
Right. And if you found that information, because you wanted to know, you want to know, like, okay, how many states do you work in? Okay, you could probably find that on the internet, particularly their website, but it could be in articles about the company. So you can start with that as a question generator for the next thing. Hey, I noticed that you work in 13 different states. How did you grow into a regional business instead of a local one, right? So now it's a more insightful question, and now the person that you're networking with goes, oh, they know a little bit about us, and it changes.
You go from being a candidate, because there's a candidate who is qualified and capable of doing a job, but there's a candidate who's qualified, capable, and brings something to the table. And when you ask questions about the organization or you engage that person, that forces that person to engage with you, and it gives the impression that you know what you're talking about because you were looking it up. And if if this is for a job hire, it's exactly who you're looking for, someone who's already looking into the organization, trying to get understanding how it works, how they may fit, and so forth. They're absolutely critical things. They seem to be forgotten too, but they're really critical.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of intimidated about reaching out and having these kind of networking meetings. It takes some courage to reach out to somebody who's in a leadership position or role in a company, to find out more about the company or about the individual. How do you talk to people about overcoming that?
What I say is let's just say you're not actually sitting in front of someone first and you're reaching out on LinkedIn. It's about brevity. When it comes to this networking thing, more often than not, when it comes to accepting requests, it has to do with time. People are so short on time, and this is why this book is 20-minute networking meeting, right? Not an hour-long networking meeting. There is no reason to be intimidated unless you've got in your mind that, a vice president or someone is just better than you, or smarter than you, or whatever. It doesn't matter, because in the end, what you're doing is you're pulling together a set of questions just to ask them. And when it comes to like a LinkedIn, it comes to brevity, just a few lines that says who you are, what you're looking for, how much time it'll take. And then, of course, I'll come to you, or we can even do by phone or video. And then that's really it. But if you can just keep in mind, you're only having a discussion. This networking thing, let's take a step back really quick. What networking really is, or actually maybe what it's really not. What it's not is it's not this name dropping, slick and smooth, kind of network with you later sort of thing. Really what it is the obtainment of information. Okay, so everybody, when you hear this, redefine the networking thing. All it is the obtainment or the exchange of information, which is the same thing. So when you have a discussion, Bob, you and I were having a discussion right now, and then offline or maybe on another day, we come back to this discussion and we fill out more of this stuff, right? More information. And we're going to be able to do it. I'll reach out to you and say, Bob, would you mind talking to me a little bit more about some of the stuff we were talking about? Now we're going back into a second networking meeting and exchanging more of that information. So all you're really doing is just having a discussion. And you do that every day. right? Every day, all day long with different people. The only difference is that you're going to be a little more focused on your topics, and you're going to stay on an agenda that's going to, hopefully max out at 20 minutes.
I think that's a great perspective to have. And I will tell you that most leaders love to be consulted. They say, listen, I would love to get 20 minutes of your time because you have this ability or knowledge that I don't currently have. And I would love to learn more about it. And you're well respected in this industry. You got 20 minutes to help a guy out.
Precisely.
Most people they're flattered by that. Of course, I'll give you 20. Now, if you asked for an hour, they're like, man, I'm pretty busy.
Yeah, yeah. Now, can I say like what would be the appeal of what you just said in that letter, right? You hit all those things in that note that we were talking about a little bit earlier that is going to be in a meeting, because those are the things that happen. Well, in a note, those are the same things that people are thinking when they're reading is, who is this person? What is this about? Right? How long is this going to take? So the way that you just approached it, because it's about word choice sometimes, right? With this brevity, that's what makes it easy. And by the way, since I'm thinking about it, this brevity thing, it's like 4 or 5 longs when you write a cold email. And the idea behind this is because it's only 4 or 5 lines long, that someone can at a glance look at it, digest it, understand, is this for them? And they're going to ask themselves, who is this person? What is this about? How long is this going to take? And so at least, at minimum, your note will get read. But lots of times I think, I'm just going to go on this tangent, lots of times I think when people reach out to network, they write a really long note because we feel like, this person doesn't know me, so I'm going to tell them, I'm going to explain them. And then in there, I'm going to explain my qualifications so they have a context on who I am so that they might talk to me. Not needed. And the problem is when it's a really long note, it kind of gets backburnered for when you have more time, if you ever get more time. So it's about brevity and that little bit of word choice, and that's it. It's about time.
But I think that falls directly into the 5 steps. When you say you introduce yourself, you give us 30 to 60 seconds to tell people who you are while you're there, and not 5 minutes. Because I don't know you. I don't know that I want to hear 5 minutes of your life story. But if you can, in 30 seconds, distill the essence of why you want to have this conversation and what a context for the conversation within your background, very quickly, then we can get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. The trouble is with, when you give too much information, it's too much to track for the other person. And really, the only information that you want to give that person at the moment is what's relevant to that particular discussion, so that it's short and sweet. And that little snapshot actually gives context for the questions that you're about to ask in the discussion. That's the difference. It's simple.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Is when you're like, we're all complex people. We have a very different backgrounds, all of us do, and sometimes we have multiple stories. A story of 30 years in the military, but I've got a story of 4 years as a leadership coach. I've got a story of 1 year as a business leader,
right,
in construction, right? So those are 3 different stories. But if I start with trying to explain how complex I am in my 30 seconds, I'm going to lose them.
Because it's too complex.
I can't. But I could say, hey, listen, I'm the COO for a construction roll up in Atlanta, and I would love to ask you about, right now I've got right over there. Now, if it's relevant that I served 30 years in the military, great. It'll come up during the conversation.
And there'll be times, when there's a combination of the two. So so I have a 20-year career in the arts as a professional actor. And I've got like right around 13, 14 years working with senior executives. To a lot of people, there's a huge gap in there and they don't understand the two. So it means that I have to explain it. So sometimes, just depending on what's relevant at the time, I'll be talking to an executive and I'll only talk about the executive stuff because that's what's relevant at the moment. And then sometimes it'll be the arts. And so I'll do that. And then sometimes people want to know, how did you go from one to the other? So for me to give a snapshot, it's a combination of the two with a slight explanation of how the transition works into the other. So I guess my bigger point with this is that you're going to have a different kind of sounding snapshot depending on who you talk to. And sometimes you might talk to the same person a second time, but this time when you give a little bit of a snapshot, they're like, will you give me a little more of your background? Well, because now you have more of an understanding of what they need to know. Now suddenly you're tweaking it to include more of your background that's relevant according to the last discussion that you two had.
Yeah, and it helps you formulate how much you're going to share about what if you do your research.
Exactly. Always research.
Yeah, so I want to know what's going to be relevant for the person that I'm talking to. Like if they're a veteran, I'm going to absolutely work into the conversation in my introduction. It's like, and it doesn't have to be a long, like, let me give you the list of all of my assignments and what I did for 30 years. No, I can say, listen, after 3 decades in the military, I retired and here's what I started doing.
Right.
Because I want to get to that piece of that, but I dropped that in there. And if they want to pull in that thread, great. That's where the conversation will go. But if my military background is not relevant to the conversation, it may not come up.
It's a great example. So let's just say that you were going to network with someone who's a corporate executive and they don't know anything about the service at all. You're probably not going to bring it up. But if you know a corporate executive and you happen to know, because somewhere down on the LinkedIn page it showed that they were in the Air Force or the Army or whatever else. Well, the thing is if you can recognize in their background, their professional corporate background, what they took from the military, then actually sitting down and starting with, I see that you were in the service. I'll explain my background in this way. And suddenly that person could understand you way better than a corporate executive could. And that's because you just kept the relevance of the military to explain your work experience. And that's a really great example of how you stay very relevant for that particular person.
Yeah, it's but you got to do your homework before you get in the door so that you can formulate that. And they may surprise you. Maybe there wasn't something on the LinkedIn, and they say, hey, by the way, I'm a veteran. I'm like, okay, well, me too. The next stage in that, after all of the discussion, which you know how it's going to go because you planned your questions in advance based on the research that you did, then you're going to ask for who else can I ask these kinds of questions to? So that it's like, okay, so now I'm asking for introductions. How do you? I know how you formulate the question because I've read your books, but is it appropriate like to ask like for specific introductions?
Sure, you
Like,
can.
I
If you know that there's a specific person that could really answer your questions, and you know those two people are connected already, you can ask for what's called a warm introduction. Hey, would you mind introducing me to this person? Another way of asking, because word choice does make a difference. So if you and I are having a discussion, we're reaching the end of that discussion, I want to ask you. Maybe I might phrase the question like, Bob, can you think of anybody else I can ask these same three military transition questions? And when you phrase it like that, right, someone's going to receive that as, can you think of anyone else who's gone through military transition? A lot of people can come to mind, as opposed to asking the question, who else can I talk to? Because then it's kind of shooting in the dark. So if you're specific in your ask, can you think of someone else that can answer these same three questions? Okay, now you know what to do. Bob knows what to do, right? Or because I'm doing an industry transition sort of thing, can you think of anybody else who's working with blockchain or quantum computing? And you get that person right in your line of thought with that specific ask.
Yeah, I love the specificity of that, right? It's when you give people kind of a narrow a choice, so you're shaping their thought because as soon as is there anybody else I can talk to? It's very, very wide. Uh, but if you narrow that down, their brain will automatically go to a shorter list, and they don't have to go through their entire Rolodex to figure out, hey, do you know what, this person might be useful to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and it's not, and it won't necessarily be one person. You could, in that same discussion, if I were to ask you, Bob, can you think of anybody else who could ask these same three questions about the transition, or if you can think of anybody who's in marketing operations when it comes to quantum computing. I'm kind of looking at both of those things. Does anybody come to mind? So you can, but again, right, it's being specific. One over here, one over here. But it stimulates someone else's imagination as to who they might know or what they know.
Yeah, I have a leader that I work with that that tells people that I said, "Look, I'm really good at multiple choice. Make it a very narrow set of choices for me. Then the answers will become apparent." So I love that mentality. The stage after that is to ask a really great question.
Yeah, the fifth and final question. This one's a shocker for people, by the way. So,
Yeah.
so the networking thing, asking for more names, that kind of throws us as the networker, because it's we're afraid to ask it. But this question tends to throw your contact, and it's a very important question, and that is, how can I help you? How can I help you for helping me in this meeting by giving me this information? And it tends to be a mind blower. It catches people off guard because we're not really used to people offering help in return for help, right? Expectations tend to be a little bit different. And especially in the corporate business world, a lot of stuff tends to be transactional. I got something you want, you got something I want. Maybe there's an exchange of money or something like that, and then off we go. But what we're talking about here with this networking thing is relationship building, right? It is not about being transactional. So yeah, taking your time with that.
Yeah. So it's funny because I do a lot of networking, particularly with veterans that are transitioning out of the military to the business world, and they happen to be coming to Tampa. I get a lot of introductions for that, and it always makes me smile when I hear that question. I think of you often, Nathan, because I'm like, they've got three questions. They asked for who else I could talk to. I'm like, I know what's coming next, and I always smile. I love it. And I remember asking you that question. Now this was, oh gosh, almost 4 years ago, and I still remember your answer because had I asked you that, you said that was so nice to ask, but you knew I was going to ask it, but you still acted kind of humble that I would ask that, and you had a very specific answer for that. In that case, it was leaving an Amazon review for your book, which I was happy to do because it is a fantastic book. So if you're out there and you're thinking about buying Nathan's book, you will, if you go through the reviews, you will see a glowing review from me on that from a few years ago. But there are, it's not as easy to just go out and buy the book because there are four versions of the book now. So tell me about that. Why did you differentiate between the four different versions? The first one came out was about executives, but then it spread.
The book is like, if you were to read the four books, it's almost exactly the same. But what I did is I rewrote them to for the specific audience. The first one was for executives, and but as I said earlier in our discussion, networking is for everyone. Networking is like, it's all the same, but it's not that if you were a student, you couldn't read the executive edition and extrapolate its meaning, right? And what you're supposed to do. But it feels so good when something is very specific to you. So what ended up happening after the executive edition is I rewrote and built the graduate edition. And then eventually came the professional edition. And then after that was the veterans edition, which I think is 2019, 18 or 19. Yeah, I think so. Um, to basically cover everyone. That's how they happened. And actually, the veterans edition was really personally important to me. I come from a military family. I wasn't in the service myself, but I have 17 uncles who served going all the way back to World War One. And there's a huge gap there between students and veterans. About for veterans, it's going from the service world into the civilian world, and that gap of information, or that huge gap, that can really only be filled in by that networking thing. And when I was a student in college, I didn't know how to get out of college and do this networking thing because there's this huge informational gap before you're tossed out into the world, right? So in my mind, that's how I thought about it, was trying to take this thing that was already existing and have it speak specifically to everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I started off with the executive version as I was coming out of the military. You were still writing the veterans version at that point. And in fact, you do talk about in the book. You talk about our conversation.
That means you're famous too, Bob. You're out there.
Um, but it was so instrumental. And when Nathan says he's a big supporter of the military, I met him through a transition program where he was coaching. There must have been 50 or 60 of us in the room, veterans who were in the process of leaving the military, either through retirement or end of tour, and you were helping all of us figure out how we could network better so that we could go find our next chapter. So thank you for your support. We often hear thank you for your service, but people like you, Nathan, that help us in our journey are hugely impactful. Hey, it's Bob Dixon here with a quick invite for you. If you're ready to revolutionize your leadership, listen up. You're invited to our new monthly workshop called Total Leader Concept. In just one session, you'll get real battle-tested strategies from my 30-plus years of military and business experience. Imagine unlocking tools that not only help you tackle challenges head-on, but also empower you to inspire and transform your team. This is your chance to break free from the old habits and become the leader you're meant to be. Spots are limited, so act fast. Visit 5eaglesleadership.com/workshop and secure your seat today. And let's redefine your leadership together. I got a practical question. So there's 3 questions that I've got to have in my pocket ready to ask these folks. I know I have to have my 30-second introduction, and I have to have the whole structure. Do I bring a notebook and I write those things down so that I don't forget them?
Yes. Here's why. And it's a notebook. It's not your phone or a device. It leaves a really solid impression if you are taking notes according to what someone is saying. That allows that impression, that other person, it shows them that you're taking them seriously. And you want that. Plus, you want your notes to back reference later down the line. When we want to stay in touch over the course of time and send a note back, the best thing to do, here's that word again, is stay relevant. How do you stay relevant? Back reference your notes. Look at what you talked about. These are the things you can be in touch with. And they'll kind of build off from there. Right.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when somebody is networking with me and they're like, hold on, I would like to write that down. That was really insightful. It's a great compliment and I just feel good about it. So I can't help but like this person more because they're impressed by something.
It's absolutely. You love it. I mean, it feels really good. They're going to take someone taking you so seriously. They're actually writing down notes. Oh, let me address the device thing. Don't risk it using a device, especially your phone. An iPad would be better, but you kind of risk that other person thinking that there are notifications. You could be checking something along the way, whatever it may be. Unless you specifically state, this is all I've got at the moment, I'm just taking notes. But don't risk it. Allow that person to see that you're doing the old-fashioned, writing it down, what that person has to say. That leaves a solid impression.
I think so too, and I have sometimes that my Gen Z and Gen Alpha folks that are now starting to show up in workplaces, I guess. But they just want to put it on a device, and they'll be in the meeting tapping away on a laptop, and sometimes they'll even have like an earbud in. I'm like, and so I'd have to explain to this. So maybe this is a generational thing. I got plenty of gray hair here, so humor me on this. It's a sign of disrespect for you to be on your phone and have an earbud in while we're talking.
It is. The reason why is because your attention is split.
So we were talking about the younger generation using devices and are they willing to set aside their norm to connect with somebody from a different generation who doesn't have that same norm? And I mean, that's incredibly important.
Honestly, I think it's a conscious decision that you have to make, understanding the importance of it and doing it to understand what the effect is.
I think that's spot on. And there's lots of difficulties with different generations combined in the workplace. And depending on how you count, there are 4 or 5 different named generations that are working in the same places. There's historically been a large amount of distrust between the different generations, right? And it's not new. If you read Socrates, he talks about the next generation being lazy and arrogant. They think they know everything. And also the young folks in Aristotle's time would also talk about how the old people just don't get it. So that's not new, but technology does make it a little more difficult. But that brings up the idea of trust. And I think connecting with people is all about trust
and familiarity. Can we go there really quick?
Yeah, I would love to.
Trust and familiarity. This is really, really critical for this time right now. It's like you're saying, this distrust that's been out there. especially in the past few years with all the news and all this conflicting, what's happened is all of us watching it and reading it, whatever, this created this distrust. We don't know, like, what's going to happen next. But as stuff starts to unwind and calm down, what we're going to find is that trust and familiarity become paramount when it comes to this relationship building. So here's an example. Let's just say that you and I sat across from each other for 10, 20 minutes, and we had a little bit of a discussion. We maybe talked about the weather or sports or kids, whatever it may be, just a little bit. And yeah, it might have been just a little bit, but it is enough to put with a name and face in the future. Should we run into each other again, like next week at the bank, like next month at the park, next year, and we pick up where we left off, right? Which means that we continue the information exchange, or maybe it's a brand new discussion and it's brand new information. But the point is, there's more information that's being exchanged between us. The more information that is exchanged between us, the more that increases the familiarity. The more familiarity there is, the more that seeds trust. And this crossroads, or trust and familiarity meet, this is where the magic happens between people. Why? Because the more I get to know about you and the more you get to actually know about me, the further we get away from being complete strangers. And if you really think about it, it's not unlike how a friendship develops, a little bit at a time over the course of time, right? Because if I were to ask you, can you point to the single moment where you became best friends with your best friend? Could you do it? Maybe not, because we usually don't have that fist bump moment, right? We're like, okay, we're BFF now. No, it's a little bit at a time over the course of time. And isn't it our friends who are our most reliable and trustworthy networking contacts? In other words, aren't they the people we go to first? Yes. And aren't they the people that they come to first? Yes. So it is for this reason that trust and familiarity and the relationship building is so critical, right? And you can start all that trust with the research. Because if you come in and sit down and have a discussion with someone and you know what you're talking about and they see that begins that.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important and insightful. And I recently did a presentation at one of the client companies that I work with about trust. And we spent about 2 hours just talking about trust. And part of it was to do an exercise where you sat in small groups and you shared this. It may sound campy, right? But you shared like, what are a life goal, quick background, again, 30 to 60 seconds on your life background. And these are people who've worked together for a long period of time. And I can't tell you how many people were surprised about something they learned about a coworker during this 20-minute exercise. And when I had researched the exercise, the consultant that shared that with me was like, look, it may sound campy, it may sound silly and juvenile like any other icebreaker. We do this with Fortune 100 companies and billionaires sitting around the table, and they are always thankful for having done the exercise, because they are, exactly as you said, Nathan, is they're making those connections that would not otherwise be made, and trust starts to build because you're no longer a stranger.
Yeah. There's a vulnerability to sharing things about yourself. And when we share things, and it doesn't have to be deeply personal, but when we share that vulnerability, that puts everyone on a level playing field, because we're no longer executives sitting around a table. We're human beings. When I find out, oh, you like fly fishing, or you hike, or suddenly we have all these other things in common that are outside of the professional world. And if we're talking about relationship building, it's great to build relationships on this professional level, but when we feel we are connected with people, that's a very different relationship. And those last way longer than the transactional business relationship.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that I think was part of that 20-minute networking meeting of that could be a beginning. You may do 20 minutes with them and never see them again. Okay, that's fine. But you should have learned something valuable from that if you planned it out. But it's often you have started something that can grow into a long-term relationship, whether it's a professional relationship or a personal relationship. It doesn't matter. It's planting all of the seeds.
Yeah, it's about the seeds, right? And these seeds, just like we said a little while ago, it's 5 years ago that you and I met and had first discussions. And now it's 5 years later where we're helping one another, in a way that's going to help other people. Seeds.
It's amazing to me that I think twice I have reached out to you and invited you to join me at something, and you always answer immediately, and it's so far always been yes, and so yeah, I mean this is just proof that a 20 minutes can change a whole lot of things. It can change your life.
Yes, and it happens on a daily basis. It's amazing. I mean, there's a book out there, this 20-minute networking meeting thing, but trying to understand that there was influence and inspiration happening, people doing this out there. It exists. People want to help by nature.
They do, and they're flattered when you ask them.
Yep, yep. Even more flattered and impressed when you were specific in your ask.
Exactly. Um, The last step in the process is after you leave. It's that follow-up phase. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that successful networkers follow up?
Yeah, so there are two kinds of follow up. There's the immediate follow up and then ongoing follow up. Immediate follow up is right after your meeting, and by that I mean you can get like within 24 hours. You can get maybe up to 48 hours, but you risk your contact feeling like an afterthought. And they have a stake in your success. It's why they said yes to your meeting in the first place, because they want to help. So you want to follow up very quickly. And then ongoing follow up, or what I like to call networking maintenance, keeping your network alive over the course of time. That one's pretty simple and very, very basic. You stay in touch about once every quarter, with some small exceptions, like your contact information has changed, you landed a new role, or maybe you've been in touch with someone who's connected to that particular contact. We like to know that the world is smaller, right? And it shrinks that world knowing we have other people in common. And it strengthens that networking bond. But once a quarter, how do you do it? It can be an email, but stay relevant, right? How do you stay relevant? Back reference your notes. Something that you can do staying in touch over the course of time is you can send articles, things that are relevant to discussions that you had. Yes, we're living in the age of information, but look at a lot of us that are listening to this right now. Do you have expertise in these and anything? Yes, but would you say that you know everything? No. That's what professional development is, all about.
Absolutely. And I recently met someone that I think you would probably love to know, Dr. Tracy Jones, and she has a podcast called Leaders on Leadership. And one of the things that she likes to say is 5 years from now, you are going to be the same person you are now, except for the people that you meet and the books that you read.
Very
And
interesting.
I'm like, that is insightful. And I think that those two things influence us more than anything else. You can watch a documentary or watch a television show. It's not going to change you the way reading a book is. And the people that you meet are going to change your life.
That's the thing. The networking is a shortcut. You can read lots of books, listen to podcasts, watch videos, but being able to sit down with someone, ask specific questions will get you specific answers.
Absolutely. Uh, this has been a tremendous conversation. I have absolutely enjoyed it. As always, whenever I get an opportunity to hang out with you, I learn something new, and today is no exception. Thank you enough for your support over the years, and for the great work that you do in helping veterans and professionals everywhere network better so that they can change their lives by meeting great people and getting the most out of it.
Thanks, Bob. I
Well,
appreciate it. It's my pleasure and it's my honor.
well, thank you so much, and we will see you soon.